You know how fairy tales feel kinda magical? Well, it's not just random stuff happening with castles and dragons. There's actually a recipe for them, a sort of blueprint that people have been using forever. So today, we're gonna look at that blueprint and see how to build a classic fairy tale from the ground up.
Here's our plan. First, we'll figure out what a fairy tale is supposed to do, what its job is. Then we'll get all our parts together, the ingredients. After that, we'll look at the instructions to put it all together. And last, we'll see why this whole setup is still a huge deal in the stories and movies we see today.
All right, let's jump into part one, the story's job. Think of it this way. Before you build something, you need to know what it's for, right? It's the same thing with a story. We have to understand its purpose before we do anything else.
So what is a fairy tale's purpose? Well, it really has two jobs. The first one is just to be fun, to tell a cool, exciting story that grabs your attention. But the second job is a little more hidden. It's supposed to teach us something, a lesson about life. So really, it's entertainment with a message tucked inside.
Okay, on to part two, the story's ingredients. Just like if you were going to bake a cake, you need certain things to make a fairy tale turn out right. So let's look at the main building blocks you'll find in pretty much every single classic fairy tale.
Our first ingredient is the characters. Now, you're not going to find regular people with regular jobs here. Fairy tales use special kinds of characters, like witches, giants, and fairies. The second you see one of them, you know you're not in the real world anymore.
These special characters often fit into patterns called archetypes. Now that's a big word, but all it really means is a kind of character blueprint that shows up over and over again in stories. You know the ones, the brave hero, the evil villain, or the wise old helper who gives good advice. These archetypes are like shortcuts that help us get who the character is right away.
Our second ingredient is the setting. Fairy tales almost always happen in a world that feels like it's from a long, long time ago. You get a lot of castles, big kingdoms, and spooky forests. This kind of setting gives us that once-upon-a-time feeling from the very start. Ingredient number 3 is the theme. The theme is just the big idea or the main message that the story is trying to teach you. It's usually not written out for you, it's hidden inside the story. For example, a story might be trying to show you that if you're kind to others, good things will happen to you.
A really common theme in fairy tales is the fight between good and evil. Good is shown with things like being brave or kind, and evil is shown with things like being greedy or cruel. Making it so black and white helps make the lesson of the story super clear. It shows us that the choices we make are important.
Our final ingredient is the conflict. That's the main problem the hero has to solve. But in a fairy tale, the problem is more than just a problem. It's almost always a test. The hero has to prove that they are brave enough, or kind enough, or smart enough to beat the challenge and earn their happy ending.
Okay, moving on to part 3. So we have our ingredients. We've got our characters, our setting, a theme, and a problem. Now we need the instruction manual for how to put all those pieces together. This is the structure that holds the whole story up.
The cool thing about a fairy tale structure is that it's usually very simple. It moves in a straight line. There's a clear beginning where we meet everybody, a middle where the big problem happens, and an end where everything gets solved. Simple as that.
And here is one of the most important rules for building a fairy tale. You absolutely must have magic. It could be anything, a fairy godmother who shows up, an animal that can talk, or a powerful spell. Magic is that one special ingredient that makes a fairy tale feel, well, magical.
And that brings us to our last section, why they still matter. We've talked about the purpose, the ingredients, and the instructions. So when it's all put together, what do we have? And why do we keep telling these same kinds of stories?
So let's just do a quick recap of our fairy tale blueprint. Every story has a clear purpose, to be fun and to teach a lesson. It needs special ingredients, characters, a setting, and a big idea. And it follows simple instructions, a beginning, a middle, and an end, all with a little bit of magic mixed in.
And here's the really cool part. This blueprint, these building blocks, they aren't just for old stories about princesses. Think about your favorite superhero movie. You got a hero, right? That's the character. You got a big city. That's the setting. There's a fight between good and evil. That's the theme. And there's a supervillain to beat. That's the conflict. See? These old building blocks are still used to make the stories we love today. The magic of the fairy tale is pretty much everywhere.